Hi, I'm Bob Schoolcraft, Friendship United Methodist Church, Punta Gorda. We welcome you on this Mother's Day. We rejoice with you. My scripture selection this morning comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 15, 1 through 17. Now, a little boy watched fascinated, completely fascinated, as his mother rubbed cold cream on her face. And he says, "Mom," he says, "why are you rubbing cold cream on your face?" And she says, "Well, to make myself beautiful." And a few minutes later, she had a tissue and she began removing the cold cream. And he looked at her and says, "What's the matter, Mom? Are you giving up?" And, well, welcome to this Mother's Day. Now, I'm the king of groan. I know that. I have all these groaners, I tell you. But it's not easy being a mom. Those of you who have children know it's not easy, regardless of their age. One mom says she's going to try something different next summer. She's going to send the dog to camp and the kids to obedience school. And that wonderful author, Irma Bombeck, once said, "What mother has never fallen on her knees when she's gone to her son's bedroom and prayed, 'Please, God, no more, no more. You're only supposed to give me what I can handle.'" It's not easy. Or as someone has said, the hand that rocks the cradle is usually attached to someone who isn't getting enough sleep. That's a paraphrase from One That Rocks the Cradle Rules the World. Of course, sometimes it's not easy having a mom. Comedian George Wallace says, "I grew up hearing such stupid things. My mother would say, 'That's the last time, Georgie, that's the last time I'm going to tell you to take out the garbage.'" Well, he adds, "Thank God," you know. And maybe mom's advice seems a little silly to us, but I would imagine with his age that George had the bottom of his pants heated up a little bit, if you know what I mean. One mother, Pam Hodgkins, tells about when her son arrived back in the United States after fighting with the 1st Marine Division in Iraq. And she says she couldn't help herself from reacting like a mom when she saw him running across the line with a bayonet in his hands, going to give it to his buddies over there. And she yelled at him. She says, "Don't run with that knife." And he says, "It's not a knife, Mom, it's a bayonet." Every mom, at some time or another, has done something stupid like that. But let's face it, most of us would have been lost without our moms. A couple was traveling cross country and they decided to drive both cars. Their 8-year-old son, Nathan, worried. He says, "Well, how are we going to keep from getting separated?" And Dad reassured him. He says, "Well, drive slowly. One car can follow the other." "But what if we do get separated?" Nathan persisted. And Dad says, "Well, I guess we'll never see each other again," and kind of laughed a little bit. And Nathan quickly answered, "Then I'm riding with Mom." And that's a smart young fellow. Actually, the situation can be summed up in the words of one mom when she said, "I'd like to be the ideal mother, but I'm too busy raising my kids." Touché. One lesson for the day our lesson for the day comes from John's Gospel, and it's perfect for Mother's Day because it's about love. "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands, and I remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love hath no man than this, that one lay down one's life for another," one of his friends. "You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I call you friends, for everything that I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might bear fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in the Father's name will be given to you. This is my command, that you love each other. Now, there are several thoughts that we can draw from this. Note, first of all, that love is a command. Jesus isn't giving us a suggestion to love our families, you know. It's a command to love our families, love our friends, even love our enemies. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. John 13:35. You can't be more direct than that. There aren't many rules in the Christian faith, not really, but this rule is ironclad. We are to love. That's what it's all about. Of course, this was not the first time that Jesus lifted up love as the great commandment. In Matthew's gospel, an expert in the law tested Jesus with this question. He says, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love your Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. This is the first, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments, Jesus declared in Matthew 22:34 through 40. A young boy in elementary school was given a test in English grammar. He was being tested on the perfect tense of verbs. One question had a column of verbs and in the present tense, and he had to put the perfect form of each of these verbs in the other column. And he came to the verb live, and in the opposite column for the perfect tense, he wrote the word love. Grammatically, he was wrong. But from Christian standpoints, he was spot on. He was right on target. The perfect form of to live is to love. John Ortberg talks about a friend of his who had a tough life. And this man had virtually no father growing up, and his mother was a very difficult person. And some of mothers and some fathers are difficult, and they make it difficult for their children. She had been married 5 times, and that's neither here nor there. Maybe she's trying to live out a Christian life. We don't know by not living together, but getting married. We don't know that. But none of the relationships lasted that long. She had little time for her children and gave them little encouragement. She was there on occasion. Christmas she loved. Now, this adult man, her son, this adult man carries many wounds from her inattention. However, late in life, his mother developed a degenerative muscular disease and gradually lost almost every physical capacity. Now, you can imagine how difficult she was to care for. None of the other children would have anything to do with her. Neither would any of the men that she had been married to. No one except this son, Ortberg's friend. Now, Pastor Ortberg says, my friend decided to love. He took her into his home and cared for her, feeding her by hand, combing her hair, cleaning up after all the messes. About all she could do was cry and moan incessantly. When his friend's mother died, Ortberg thought to himself about his friend, though, that this was going on. He says, how can I stand this? How can he stand this? I've been given so many blessings, Ortberg said. Blessings of the church and scripture and family exponentially greater than this guy. And I don't know if I could love like this. And now she's died, and 16 people come to her funeral. None of the other kids came. The son who cared for her had a little tape recorder that she had bought him as Christmas gifts many years ago. And he played a tape of her and his mom singing a Christmas carol. He talked about how she loved Christmas and how that when he was a kid, he would play the guitar and she would sing with him. Ortberg says he didn't love her perfectly, not by a long shot. But he loved her when loving was the hardest. He loved her when no one else would. And he remembered her with kind words. That must have been difficult loving her when she showed him so little love. But that's what Christian love is. That's the kind of love that Christ gave us when we were so undeserving. Love is a command. Note, secondly, that love is sacrificial. Christ speaks of laying down one's life for one's friends. For many of us, love is a squishy emotion without any real content. I love what you can do for me, is the basic rule of love. You meet my needs, so I have a warm feeling for you. It warms my heart. We sing about such love, but in our hearts, we know that such love is horribly superficial. True love is sacrificial. There's a story about two tribes in the Andes who were at war. One tribe lived in the lowlands and the other in the mountains. The mountain people invaded the lowlanders one day, and as part of their plundering, they kidnapped a baby of one of the lowlander families and took it back to the mountains with them. The lowlanders, naturally were upset. They didn't know how to climb a mountain. They didn't know any of the trails on the mountain. And they didn't know where to find the mountain people or how to track them up the steep terrain. And even so, they sent out their best party of fighting men to climb the mountain and bring the baby home. The men tried first one method of climbing and then another. They tried one trail and then another. And after several days of effort, John, they had climbed only several hundred feet. Feeling hopeless and helpless, the lowlander men decided that the cause was lost, and they prepared to return to the village below. As they were packing their gear for the descent, they saw the baby's mother walking toward them, and they realized that she was coming down the mountain, that they hadn't figured out how to climb. And then they saw that she had the baby strapped to her back. How could that be? One man greeted her and said, "We couldn't climb this mountain. How did you do this when we, the strongest and most able men in the village, couldn't do it?" And she shrugged her shoulders and said, "It wasn't your baby." Every parent worth his or her salt understands there is nothing that we will not do for our children. Of course, some are at that stage of life when it's their parents who need sacrificial love. It's part of the circle of life. Our parents provided for our needs when we were young, but it's now they who have pressing needs. Who will be there for them? You may be part of what is often referred to as the sandwich generation, caught between the needs of your children and the pressing needs of your aging parents. That's really a difficult place. A lady named Bev Holsizer tells about a time years ago when her mother came to visit. And her mother asked Bev to go shopping with her because she needed a new dress. And Bev confesses that Bev, is not a patient person. And she did not look forward to going shopping with her mom. But they set off for the mall nevertheless. And they visited nearly every store that carried ladies' dresses, and her mother tried on dress after dress after dress, rejecting them all. And as the day wore on, Bev grew weary and more impatient, and her mother grew more frustrated. And finally, at their last stop, her mother tried on this lovely blue three-piece dress. The blouse had a bow at the neckline, and as Bev stood in the dressing room with her mom, she watched as her mom tried with much difficulty to tie the bow. Her hands were so badly crippled from arthritis that she couldn't do it. And immediately, Bev's impatience gave way to an overwhelming wave of compassion for her mom, and she turned away to try to hide the tears that welled up in her eyes. Regaining her composure, she turned back to her mother to tie the bow for her. The dress was beautiful. Her mother bought it. Their shopping trip was over, but the event was etched indelibly in Bev's memory. For the rest of the day, her mind kept returning to that moment in the dressing room and the vision of her mother's hands trying to tie that bow. Those loving hands that had fed her and bathed her and dressed her and caressed and comforted her and most of all prayed for her were now touching her in a most remarkable manner. And later in the evening, Bev went to her mother's room and took her mom's hand in her own and kissed them. And then, much to her surprise, told her mom that to her, they were the most beautiful hands in the world. Bev says she's so grateful that God let her see with new eyes what a precious, priceless gift a loving, self-sacrificing mother is. She prays that someday her own hands and her heart will have earned such a beauty of their own. And some of you can relate to that simple story. You remember how many loving sacrifices your mom or your dad made in your behalf. And now you watch sadly as your parents struggle with aging. Now it's your turn to make sacrifices, Joan. And again, it's not easy. Christ never promised that it would be easy. But love is sacrificial. Love is what life is all about. In Corinthians 13, St. Paul summed it up like this: these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Author J. Allen Peterson tells about a flight he once took on a 747 out of Brazil. He was awakened from sleep by a voice announcing, "We have a very serious emergency." 3 engines had quit because of fuel contamination, and the 4th was expected to go at any second. The plane began to drop and turn into the night, preparing for an emergency landing. And at first, the situation seemed unreal to Peterson, but when the steward barked, "Prepare for impact," he found himself and everyone around him praying. There's no atheist in a foxhole, and I doubt if there's any atheist in a plane that's ready to crash. As he buried his head in his lap and pulled up his knees, he said, "Oh God, thank you. Thank you for the incredible privilege of knowing you. Life has been wonderful." And as the plane approached the ground, his last cry was, "Oh God, my wife, my children." Peterson survived. As he wandered about the airport in a daze, aching all over, he found he couldn't speak, but his mind kept racing. What were my last words? What was the bottom line? As he remembered, he had his answer: relationship. It's all about relationship. Reunited with his wife and sons, he found that all he could say to them over and over and over was, "I love you, I appreciate you, I love you, I appreciate you." And he discovered, as sooner or later we all will discover, the bottom line of life is love. Love is what life is all about. God created this world so that he could have persons he could love. God sent his only begotten Son to die on the cross because of love. When one day we are gathered around God's throne with all those we love, we will discover the final payoff for living is love. These three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Today, go forth from this place determined to live a life of love that you might perfectly fulfill the commandments of Christ. Go forth in peace and happy Mother's Day. Rejoice with one another. I love you.